Have you ever sat in a group conversation knowing exactly what you want to say, but by the time you finish forming it, the moment is gone, and someone turns to you and says, "You're so quiet." Not mean, just casual. But it sticks, because your mind wasn't blank. It was busy. Here's the quiet myth we've all absorbed. If you're not talking, you must not be confident. If you're not fast, you must not be sharp. But silence isn't a lack of content. It's often processing speed running on a different setting. Some psychologists suggest that more introverted brains operate with higher baseline cortical arousal. Translation: your system is already switched on. So when you walk into a loud room, you're not ramping up. You're already near full capacity. That's why one-on-one conversations feel fine. But chaotic group talk feels like merging into traffic that's already speeding. It's not social incompetence, it's stimulation threshold. And here's where it gets interesting. Speed is rewarded socially. The fastest responder looks the smartest. The loudest voice sounds the most certain. But depth takes time. If your brain naturally runs simulations, tone analysis, consequence prediction, internal editing, you're not slow. You're integrating. By the time others react, you're already 3 mental steps ahead. Research on response latency shows that some people take longer before speaking, not because they don't know what to say, but because they refine before releasing. In a culture addicted to immediacy, that looks like hesitation. But what if it's precision? There's also the dopamine layer. Studies suggest extroverted brains respond more strongly to external reward, novelty, social energy, attention spikes. But if your reward system leans inward, stimulation doesn't excite you the same way. Depth does, meaning does, connection does. That's why a party can drain you, but a long, focused conversation can energize you. It's not that you dislike people, it's that your brain doesn't chase volume, it optimizes for substance. And this creates tension. Because when you speak less, people assume you think less. But often you're thinking so much that you filter yourself before the sentence even exists. That gap between internal complexity and external perception can quietly erode confidence. You start wondering, why can't I just say things faster? Why do I always think of the perfect response later? But what if nothing is wrong with your timing? What if your brain simply prioritizes depth over immediacy? If your nervous system reaches stimulation threshold faster, staying quiet isn't withdrawal. It's regulation. It's cognitive pacing. It's choosing signal over noise. And if that's true, then being quiet might not be a weakness. It might be a different strategy entirely. Because if silence equals processing, if depth is your default, then maybe the real question isn't, why am I so quiet? Maybe it's this: what exactly is your brain optimizing for? Because quiet isn't random, it's reinforced. If listening kept social friction low, your system strengthened it. Over time, quiet became identity, and identity becomes self-fulfilling. You're the quiet one. At first it's descriptive, later it's limiting. There's another mechanism underneath this, something called the behavioral inhibition system. It's the brain's evaluation network. Not fear, assessment. Some people run stronger scanning systems. You walk into a room and instantly register tone shifts, hierarchy, tension, subtle discomfort. You notice who's dominating, who's shrinking, who's performing. That constant analysis consumes bandwidth. And when your brain is busy mapping the social landscape, speaking becomes secondary, not impossible, just selective. I remember being in a fast-paced discussion where ideas were flying. I barely spoke. Not because I didn't care, but because I was connecting patterns. When I finally contributed, I offered one synthesis point that tied everything together. Someone later said, "You don't talk much, but when you do, it matters." That wasn't delay. That was integration. Neuroscience research suggests reflective thinkers show stronger activation in networks tied to internal meaning making and memory linking. So when you're quiet, your brain may not be disengaging. It may be consolidating. There's also an energy component people underestimate. Social interaction isn't neutral. It costs cognitive resources. Some nervous systems treat high stimulation environments like a sprint. If your brain senses overload, it regulates. Less talking, more observing. Strategic engagement. Not laziness, Regulation. If you've ever left a crowded event exhausted but couldn't explain why, it might not be social weakness. It might be neural budgeting. So here's the uncomfortable question. When you're quiet, are you actually withdrawn? Or are you filtering, evaluating, conserving, and choosing precision? Because those are very different narratives. The world rewards projection, but projection isn't the only form of strength. Some people broadcast, some people build. If you've ever felt underestimated because you don't compete for airtime, that doesn't mean you lack substance. It may mean you refuse to trade clarity for speed. There's a reason your brain works this way. You're not broken, you're wired differently. And maybe your advantage isn't speaking more. Maybe it's knowing exactly when to speak. If this kind of content makes you feel a little more understood, consider hitting subscribe so you don't miss the next videos. We're going to keep exploring how quiet brains actually work, and you might start seeing that your silence was never something that needed fixing.